All right. Okay. Thank you for joining on. This is the fifth installment of the Beaufort Chambers Ask the Expert series, where we're trying to bring expertise to help businesses address the challenges they're dealing with as they reopen after COVID-19. Really happy to have both Jamie Suber, Chief of Staff, and Todd Timmons, the Chief Legal Officer from the South Carolina Department of Employment and Workforce, on the line. The title for today's session was Unemployment Benefits in the COVID Era. We want to zoom that out just a tiny bit. We will focus on unemployment, but wanted to start with Jamie and Todd, just first getting a quick baseline set on what the Department of Employment and Workforce, your purpose, your mission, the core programs you guys administer as an organization for the state and for employers around the state.
Okay, Ian, thank you for the opportunity. Again, my name is Jamie Suber, and I appreciate the opportunity speaking with you in your area in regards to some of the interesting and I guess critical things that are taking place at Employment and Workforce. And, I'm not trying to dominate this conversation, but I think between Todd and myself, we'll try to provide as much general information as we can and see if we can answer questions pertaining to what's going on, in regards to employment and workforce. So fundamentally, core missions at the agency include unemployment insurance, employment services, workforce development, and labor market information are all mandated programs in which we implement and what we deliver here at the agency. Obviously, the prominent focus has been on unemployment since early March in regards to the 4 CARE Act program provisions that we have executed at the agency and pushed out to those that are in need through the beginning of this pandemic. However, we also stand in the middle in regards to being the bridge from unemployment insurance to reemployment. And our staff really has been focused primarily on providing unemployment insurance benefits to individuals, but there's still a lot of work that we're doing in order to support job seekers and businesses as they look to bring on qualified individuals for their employment needs. Additionally, we're required to house and facilitate the Bureau of Labor Statistics information associated with how we're performing, and we publish the unemployment rate on a monthly basis. Additionally, Todd is responsible for managing our appeals department, which also is a part of the unemployment insurance program where decisions are made on behalf of both claimants and employers. So just to adjust us up from I guess, mission critical, that's really what we are from a mission standpoint. Obviously, us having this call and you asking for a focus on UI, or focus on the claims and benefits process, speaks to the volumes of claims that we've received over the past 10, 11, 12 weeks. To date, we have well over 550,000 initial claims that have come into the unemployment insurance program. We've paid close to $1.5 billion in combined monies associated with the CARES Act, federal programs, as well as regular state UI benefits. In regards to the programs that we have rolled out and implemented through this pandemic, first being our standard unemployment insurance program. And from that, we rolled into the federal pandemic unemployment compensation program, which provides an additional $600 to those individuals that have been determined eligible for benefits. Then from that, we rolled into the pandemic unemployment assistance program, which was geared primarily for the 1099s, the gig workers, the self-employed. And then as recently as on last week, we pushed out the pandemic emergency unemployment compensation program, which provides an additional 13 weeks of benefit for claimants who have exhausted their regular UI benefits. And, I'll stop right there and pause.
Jamie, you were hitting on the trends and just how massive a change has happened for the agency and for workers around the state. Could you elaborate just a little bit further to kind of help give some context and perspective? How has the past 10 weeks looked in comparison to earlier this year or even the same period last year? And we've seen the headlines, but I think some of your context might be helpful to help set the stage.
So prior to the shift in regards to the pandemic in the first or second week of March, we were averaging on a weekly basis around 1,500 to 2,000 initial claims coming into the unemployment insurance program. From that point forward, we got to our highest week, which was well over 80,000 new claims coming in. And again, over the past 6 to 7 weeks, we've seen a decline in the number of new claims, but we're still extremely high in regards to the volume of claims coming into the system. A great deal of efforts as the economy has opened back up, it's trying to redirect some of the unemployment individuals back into the workforce and back into the work opportunities that employers have been providing for them. But when we talk about magnitude and volume, this is something that we've never seen. This is not, any volume that I think any state or any other country can be prepared for. So we've done a lot to do all we can to provide services. There's still a lot of individuals that are hurting. There's still a lot of individuals that are in need of relief and benefits. But again, the volume is something that we've never, ever could possibly imagine. When we started this pandemic, I think from our contact center, we primarily had close to 50 dedicated customer service representatives taking calls on a daily basis. From that point, we're now well over 600 dedicated customer service representatives that are staffing our contact center to help individuals get through their unemployment inquiries and their unemployment needs. So I hope, from a workload standpoint, we kind of tried to show you where we were to where we are now. And again, we do see some favorable signs in regards to the workload going down, but ultimately we have a high volume of work and a lot of individuals across the state that are in need of some type of relief, some type of benefit. Todd?
Yeah. It's been an incredible stress test, I know, for the agency, as it has been for a lot of employers, and we're all a little bit still in shock and coming out of it. You alluded to the changes in unemployment benefits that were promulgated as part of the CARES Act. Could you set the stage real quickly for folks on the call? What's the baseline unemployment benefits for South Carolina employees? How has that changed because of the CARES Act, and kind of the timeline for those expanded benefits?
Okay. I can start, and Todd, you can jump in whenever. I'm comfortable with that. But primarily when you're talking about regular state unemployment insurance benefits, once an individual has been found eligible for benefits, the highest weekly benefit amount was $326. The lowest weekly benefit amount being, $40 to $42. So depending on, what the compensation is based on what they will be earning, and that is up to 20 weeks. They can get that regular state unemployment for up to 20 weeks. As part of the CARES Act, what happened is the federal pandemic unemployment compensation rolled out, and an additional $600 being provided on top of the individual's weekly benefit amount. So whether they were getting $326 or they were getting $300, they're getting $100. That weekly benefit amount would be that plus an additional $600, which will last up until the end of July. So that being the federal pandemic unemployment program as well as regular UI. The next program that we worked to implement was the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Program, which is very, very different than regular UI. UI is not intended for the self-employed, not intended for 1099 gig workers. It was not intended for those individuals because they are not contributing into the unemployment insurance system. But through the CARES Act provisions, we created this program, which took a lot of hard work to allow for those individuals to come through and receive benefits that they would not normally receive. Through the PUA program, we established a minimum weekly benefit amount, which is $131. If those individuals had more earnings, they could provide additional information to us and we would adjust their weekly benefit amount. But that also allows the individuals to receive whatever their weekly benefit amount is, as well as the additional $600 up until the end of July. And then as recently as last week, the pandemic emergency unemployment compensation is what we pushed out, which allows for additional 13 weeks of benefits for those that may have already exhausted their 20 weeks of benefits. So I think that walks you through the different programs that we had to work very closely with our vendor, very closely with guidance from the Department of Labor to ensure that we implemented these programs as it's, prescribed in law. So that's kind of how we worked to make that happen over a very short period of time. And this is very, very complex. I don't want to sit here and make it seem as this was easy. It's very hard to do. And we're still working through some of the challenges associated with it. Again, we know people are in need and people could be moving from program to program. It is very fluid, but ultimately, I think we've had a successful launch for these programs, and we're doing all we can to ensure that people are getting benefits as timely as possible.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I know folks on the call understand the workload that you guys have been under. There was some initial stress and strain. I think the backlog seems to have been largely cleared. I wanted to kind of pivot to what has been one of the hot topics for employers over the recent weeks since reopening has expanded. Folks who made furloughs or layoffs early in the pandemic starting to need to bring workers back. Some have experienced some reticence from workers wanting to return, either because of health reasons and in some cases because they're, with the expansion of benefits under the CARES Act, are actually earning more on unemployment. Could you kind of talk us through this process for an employer who's looking to bring folks off of either layoff or furlough, however it was identified at the beginning? What are their legal rights? What's the expectations on them? And what are some of the things they ought to consider as they're looking at their restaffing efforts?
Yeah, Ian, I can take that. So, we've definitely heard the general concern about people being reluctant to return, either because of unemployment benefits or because just what's going on in the world today. But the general rule is the starting point is always you cannot choose to remain on unemployment or go back to work. If work's available, you're expected to go back. That's the general rule. There should not be a perception out there that there's an option for people to choose to be on unemployment or to go back to work. There are some exceptions to that general rule, but again, it's not that they're choosing to, it's that they're, as a direct result of COVID, they can't go back. So for example, someone who's been diagnosed with the disease, somebody who's been instructed to quarantine by their doctor, someone who's caring for a family member or a member of their household who has COVID, somebody that has childcare limitations because of the COVID closure. All those people could potentially remain on unemployment under that PUA program that Jamie talked about. But again, those aren't people that are choosing to do it. These aren't people that are saying, okay, I can make more on unemployment than I can working. These are people who generally have a limitation as a direct result of COVID. So that's the starting point. And that's generally what we're seeing is we're seeing businesses are eager to open up and to follow the guidance that's been given to them to do it safely. And employees are happy to come back to work. For the exceptions, for the people that are trying to stay on unemployment instead of working, we've set up a group, a task force to pay attention to those issues and try to respond. Employers, I'm guessing that's the people that are on this call, they can report to us when they've asked someone to come back to work and they've refused. And what that will do is it'll trigger in our system for us to go and take a further look at that claim. You can do it through your employer portal with us, where you would normally get notified of claim issues, or you can send an email. Information on this is called our offers of work page on our website. But we've set up a special email where if you've got a large number of employees where it doesn't make sense for you to upload each one individually through our portal, we set up an email address where we can take a spreadsheet with all these people's names. So if they go on our website, look for offers of work under the COVID resource page for employers, you'll see how to contact us, and we can send you that spreadsheet to fill out and tell us, hopefully you're not in that situation where you're having to submit multiple people. But if you are, we've got a way to streamline it so you don't have to do every single one through the portal. But that's kind of how it works is we would take a look at that and see what was the offer, when was it made, was it for the same job, and then the employee will have a chance to tell their side of the story before we turn the benefits off.
That makes sense, and I appreciate the clarity and response and the pointing us to the resources. That's helpful. One other question I know we've gotten from employers is to the extent to which COVID-related layoffs or furloughs may impact their rating as participants in the unemployment insurance program. I know some of this may require legislative action, but do you have any guidance preliminarily on, do we know how this might affect employers down the road who really didn't have a choice because of closure and pandemic?
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, the place to start is we are not charging against your account for benefits that were paid during the state of emergency. So that's a state law that says benefits paid as a result of a state of emergency are not charged. So you're not going to be put in a higher tax class just because you've had COVID-related layoffs. Now, if you've had layoffs for other reasons where people have drawn benefits and it hasn't been adjudicated as a COVID issue, then that would still affect your benefits. But for anything that's come through as a COVID reason, that's not going to put you in a higher tax class relative to the rest of the workforce. Something to keep in mind is that benefit, that law is going to not be in effect when the state of emergency is lifted. So it was just re-upped again for another 15 days. I'm not sure how long this state of emergency will extend, but when the state of emergency goes away, that state law is no longer in effect and we would go back to charging. So in that scenario, if you've got layoffs that occur later in the summer, it's very possible that those are going to be charged to your account and could affect your tax rate. In terms of down the road, it's too early to tell. I mean, the trust fund will have to be rebuilt. I mean, there's no question that we're seeing periods of 12% unemployment. That is not sustainable with what we have now. Fortunately, South Carolina, we were very conscious of rebuilding it. We were in a solvent place. We were not in a crisis that some other states are in right now because they've already used up the money that they had. We still have money in the trust fund. It's still good to go. But if this goes on for a while, it will have to be rebuilt. And it's just too soon to tell. That's going to be a decision for the policymakers, whether it is some sort of federal money that's allocated to us, a federal loan or a federal, basically a grant, or if it's coming for state money. Is the General Assembly going to make an appropriation to build that? Or is it going to be done by employer taxes? So all those things are going to be decisions that are made at the policy level that our agency really, it's just too soon for us to know. I mean, other than there's going to be an impact, it's just we're not going to be cutting taxes like we have the last few years for sure.
That's some helpful perspective. At this point, I'd invite anybody who's on the call and has a question, let us know. We'll unmute you. You can ask it live or shoot it to us via chat, and we'll pitch it over to Jamie and Todd. As we're seeing if any questions come in from folks who are with us live, I'd like to kind of zoom back out, and I'm not going to ask anybody on the call to prognosticate about the future, but in the event that pandemic-related circumstances cause a business to have to go back into an altered workforce status, could you walk through some of the sort of self-assessment questions or things you might advise employers to ask themselves? What are their options and what should they be considering to help their workers if they find themselves in this situation again later in the year or down the road?
Yeah, I think Jamie and I can, of course, only speak to the unemployment insurance side of it. We couldn't give like general advice, but from an unemployment perspective, if you're looking at a situation like that, the employer filed claims process is something we always advocate. What that does is the employer themselves initiates the unemployment claim with our agency. And so it's basically uploading a spreadsheet with the employee's information in it. And then that'll result in us processing claims on their behalf. and it greatly streamlines the process and the experience for your employees. They pretty much have to do nothing. They really don't have to do anything at all other than have their information uploaded by you, and then we'll send them payments, because if you're uploading their information, we're going to take you at your word that they're laid off and so that's kind of something to consider. We've got information on that process on our website as well, but that's kind of the number one thing I would say is, if you're in that situation, consider the employer filed claims process, because your employees will get benefits quicker and the application process will be much simpler.
Thanks, Todd. Well, an interesting question came in, and a issue we've heard quite a bit, the child care concern. Schools closed, many daycares still either limited or closed, and employees who are find themselves in a child care position. Are they allowed to remain on unemployment? Is there another program they should look into? If child care is the primary reason you can't return back to work, how should both the employee and the employer evaluate that situation?
Yeah, that's a good question. So normally, if you don't have childcare, you're not going to be eligible for unemployment, because you're not able and available for work. You're at home with children. You're not actually in the job market. That is a little different if your childcare is closed as a result of COVID. So, for example, I was fortunate enough, my daycare's opened back up, and if they're closed for a holiday or something, they're not closed because of COVID. They're closed for a holiday or whatever other reason it is. So I'm not going to be eligible for that program because my daycare is not closed because of COVID. Similarly, when the school year is over, you would not be eligible for unemployment because your school is not closed because of COVID. They're closed because it's summer break. But for the people who have school-age children and the school is still closed currently because of COVID, that's a reason for eligibility under our pandemic unemployment assistance program. So if they're not currently receiving UI and they need to submit an application for that PUA program, because you do have potential eligibility under that program. And that's something else to keep in mind for the employers on the call, is that may be a reason why somebody's still receiving benefits even though you've recalled them to work. If they're eligible, if they tell us and they self-certify that they're eligible for one of these COVID reasons, that's a reason they can stay on unemployment. So that's something to keep in mind as to why somebody might still be on unemployment even though the business is open again.
Yeah, that's helpful. And so for an employee who normally their children would be in schools, which have been closed in the summertime, their child may normally be in a day camp or some kind of a program, and many of those are still uncertain. So if the reason that normal provision of childcare isn't available is because of COVID-19, that's still an eligible claim.
Right. That would be the same. Yeah. The summer program being closed would be the same as the school being closed. If their childcare that they normally would have is closed because of COVID, that would be a potential eligible claim.
I'll invite any further questions from folks who are on the line. Not hearing anybody jumping in. I see a hand. You want to unmute can we unmute?
So what kind of I'm Rosemary Hedden, and I work with United Way and I do the helpline. What kind of documentation would you need if a person is going to be out on unemployment because of their children being not being able to go to daycare? What type of documentation would you like to have?
Yeah, that's a good question. They will not have to submit documentation up front. Now, it's certainly a good idea to go ahead and get, I'm sure there would be some sort of an email or some sort of communication. Any of that's fine.
Okay.
They should keep a hold of that because we do audit, right? So we may not ask for it up front, but they are subject to an audit. We do have a fraud detection unit that at some point they're going to be checking into these issues, especially if it's people who are filing later into the year, into the summer when schools are closed. These are things they might be asked about it. So the answer to your question is, whatever documentation you have, if it's an email that says we're closed for this period, or anything like that. You wouldn't need to necessarily submit it until they're asked,
Okay.
or if they have some kind of an issue. But Jamie, is there anything else you want me to add on that?
Yeah, and Todd's 100% correct. I just don't want you thinking that an excuse or a document is basically what we're using to determine
Right.
eligibility. It's not. It's not a requirement of eligibility.
Because that's one of the first things folks ask me is what kind of documentation do they need? So I appreciate your answer. Thank you.
Yeah, it's kind of like filing your taxes with the IRS, right? You want to have all your supporting documents if you get audited, but that's not going to hold up their benefits on the front end, or it shouldn't.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Before we adjourn, we do have a fairly high percentage of self-employed folks in our market here in Beaufort and Port Royal, a lot of sole proprietorships and small business owners who may have been eligible for those benefits that were extended by the federal government. Are there any complementary state programs for those individuals? And do you have any anticipation of what may happen with that program at their June 30 expiration or July 30 expiration?
Yeah, so the only thing going away on July 31st is the additional $600. The PUA program that Jamie mentioned for self-employed folks goes through the end of the year. So the only thing that happens at the end of July is you don't get the additional $600 unless Congress chooses to extend it or change that. That goes away, but they're still eligible under that program just for a reduced amount. It would be similar to the amount that Jamie mentioned to you in terms of the state. Up to 326 would be what they're eligible for. So that's kind of how that would work. It's not going away in July.
Terrific. Todd, Jamie, I sincerely appreciate you both taking time out of what I know is an incredibly busy period for the Department of Employment and Workforce. We appreciate you getting on the line, talking with our members live. And as a reminder, we'll make this available for folks who weren't able to join live to hit our website and listen after the fact. Again, thank you both. Thanks everybody who joined us live, and have a great rest of your, what day is it? Tuesday? Wednesday? Who knows? Wednesday. Have a great rest of your Wednesday afternoon. Thanks everybody.
Thank you.